when I was violated. My brother unfortunately became a vegetable to save me. Dad blamed me for the loss of his proud son. Mom asked me why I didn't go to my death, saying that I was the one who deserved to be in the hospital bed the most. Later I really died. But my brother miraculously woke up. My brother looked at the unfamiliar surroundings with a blank face, turned his head to the doctor and said, "Hello. Can you please notify Mom and Dad for me?" The doctor smiled and nodded repeatedly. I guess the doctors were all happy for him too. Seeing the doctor's nod, my brother added, "By the way, there's also my sister, Arya. Don't forget to inform her, haha." As soon as the words fell, Mom stepped on her high heels and hurriedly arrived. She was still so radiant and capable. Following her was Dad in a suit. Mom covered her mouth and looked at her brother with an incredulous face. "Leo, you're awake. I'm not dreaming, am I?" The younger brother shook his head and unfolded his arms towards Mom and Dad. "It's not a dream. Mom and Dad, I'm better. I'm really better." A family of 3 hugged together and cried with joy. What a touching picture. Even the little nurse beside them read in her eyes. After a while, the younger brother glanced at the door and wondered, "Mom, where's my sister? Didn't come along?" Mom froze. "I'll call her here." She took the cell phone and walked for me to the outside of the hospital room. After flipping through her address book, she finally realized that she didn't have my number saved at all. Her fingers tried several times on the dialing screen, but she could not remember my number. So she chose to send a WeChat message. The last message she sent me 2 months ago is still in our WeChat conversation. "I don't have you as a daughter. The most should be lying in the hospital bed is you. Why don't you go to Dia?" Mom's face sank for a few seconds, quickly typing a few lines on the keyboard. "Leo has woken up and is clamoring to see you. He just woke up. He can't stand the excitement. Don't say what you shouldn't say." "But Mom, I'm already dead. What can I say? What should I say?" For several days in a row, I didn't return messages. In the face of my brother's inquiries, Mom began to grow impatient. Yet she could only take it out on me, like she did when I was a child. "Wolf-hearted thing. Your brother woke up and you didn't even come to see him. And you didn't reply to the messages either. If he hadn't saved you in the first place, you would have died long ago." I've heard these words countless times over the past 5 years. Mom was right. It was my brother who saved me. That night when I was off work, I passed by the alley, and a hand covered my mouth. I couldn't even see the man's face in the dark. Damn Pally. I was dragged into the corner, and the animal tore off my clothes a little bit. No matter how much I cried and begged for mercy, the man was indifferent. He slapped me in the face one after another, until I couldn't make a sound, desperate to witness the whole violation. It was my brother. He came to me through this alley, and he fought with the man like a madman. But how could a college student not yet graduated defeat a grown man? My brother was stabbed several times, and the scarlet blood soaked through his clothes. He pointed at the cake mixed with mud. "Sis. Happy birthday, sis." Then collapsed straight in front of me. Dad patted Mom's shoulder from behind. "Don't be mad. Arya isn't close to us. It's not like you don't know. It's a good day for Leo to get out of the hospital. Don't get spoiled." I sat in Dad's car and followed them home. Along the way, my brother chattered endlessly, saying how fast the city was developing. A little later, he said that we must make up for all the King of Thieves that we hadn't watched in the past. He is always so optimistic and sunny, as if lying in a hospital bed for 5 years. It does not affect him in the slightest. I am 3 years older than my brother. Since he was born, what's good to eat? The first person Mom thinks of will only be him. And I can only eat the leftovers. It's like when my brother eats chicken thighs. I can only eat meatless chicken claws and wings. When my brother wants a new school bag, Mom buys it for him without saying a word. I wanted an exercise book, and Mom would say, "You don't have the brains. It's useless to buy it. Look at your brother. He came first in this exam again. Yes. My brother inherited good genes from mom and dad. I, on the other hand, as my classmate said behind my back, I don't think Arya is even her own child. Her mom is a famous lawyer. Her dad is a college professor. And look at her. She's so stupid. She's always at the bottom of the exams. I hated my brother at that time. I naively thought that he was the one who stole mom and dad's love. He seemed to realize it too. I caught him the nth time, sneaking snacks and toys into my school bag. He scratched his head and asked me cautiously, "Sister, do you not like me?" I glared at him without a good look. "Yes. I don't like you. Don't stuff messy things into my school bag in the future." A moment of despondency flashed under his eyes, and he turned to smile at me. "It's okay. I like my sister just fine. Oftentimes I think my mom has a point. A boy as good as my brother shouldn't have become a vegetable because of me. But fortunately, he woke up. For mom and dad specially invited relatives and friends and hosted a banquet for my brother at home. To celebrate his new life. Grandma, on crutches, embraced her eldest grandson, blessed by our ancestors. "Leo, you've finally woken up." Her cloudy eyes filled with tears. Uncles and uncles took their brother's hand and asked questions. Some said it was a medical miracle. Some said it was because of his good heart. When people were immersed in the joy of their brother's awakening, his sudden words made the faces of those present go a few shades colder. "Mom and Dad, don't forget to call my sister. Tell her I'm home. And ask her to come straight to the house when she comes back for her business trip." Mom and Dad saw that I wasn't replying to their messages, so they could only use the reason that I was traveling on business to put off my brother. They didn't think for a second that something had happened to me. They only thought that I was a wolf and a white-eyed wolf. I didn't understand why I had a younger brother. Everyone didn't like me anymore. When I grew up, I gradually understood. Not all parents are born to love their children. Like a lion giving up an inferior cub. Everyone in the family, except me, graduated from a prestigious university. And the worst was a first class. I was the only one who barely made it to the second grade line with all my efforts. It's a stain on the family. 5. My brother looked at the table of dishes and frowned gently. "Why did you put in so much cilantro again?" Dad's eyebrows smiled. Clamped a peeled shrimp in front of his brother. "I remember you like eating cilantro the most. How come you've changed your habits after 5 years of lying down?" My brother said thank you to Dad. He was polite as always. "Have you forgotten my sister's cilantro allergy? Next time, don't let Mrs. Chang put cilantro in her cooking." I stood next to Dad, noting the expression on his face. It wasn't that he had forgotten, but that he had never remembered. When I was a kid, because my brother loved cilantro, I would pick and choose every time we ate. But in Mom and Dad's eyes, it became picky eating. They would scold me and punish me with no eating. When I cried and defended myself, they would only blame me for not saying so earlier. But the next time I ate, there was still cilantro in every dish. In this family, except for my brother who I used to hate, no one remembers my preferences. Even more so, no one cares about me. 6. After dinner, my brother went straight up to the second floor and into my room. The neatly made bed, the dusty desk. All of them revealed my distance from this home. After graduating from college, my mom gave me 2 choices. Either you choose to go on to graduate school, or get out of this house. I don't have a daughter as unmotivated as you. I think in this world, not everyone is perfect. Ordinary people abound. I don't have any big ambitions, nor do I want to keep catering to her, because I could never be the perfect daughter she had in mind. So I chose to move out and go to work for an average company. My brother sat at my desk and murmured, "Sis, the day after tomorrow is your birthday. When you come back, don't move out again. You promised." My eyes were so dry that I reached up and touched the corners of my eyes. There were no tears. Souls don't shed tears, do they? After I moved out, My brother asked me for my address every day. I couldn't resist him. On my birthday. He said he had bought a cake to celebrate my birthday. It was also on that day. I was no longer me. I was pulled into an endless abyss. Mom and Dad's resentment tormented me to the point where I couldn't sleep all night. The doctor told me, "You're still young. You can't live in the shadows for the rest of your life. Try to come out. Your brother, I'm sure, doesn't want you to give up on yourself like this." I smiled bitterly as I touched the scars crisscrossing my arms. It's not that I haven't tried. But Mom and Dad wouldn't let me walk out. They reminded me over and over that I was guilty. That I should live in self-loathing and guilt forever. 7. I followed my brother into my mom's study. It was the first time I entered her study. She was a famous lawyer in N City. Mr. Chen, who had never lost a case she had taken on. Mom saw my brother enter and a smile appeared on her face. "Why aren't you asleep yet? Are you not used to it?" The younger brother shook his head. "Mom, is my sister still working at the same company as before? I want to check it out tomorrow. You remembered to buy me a cell phone." Mom's expression froze and she was silent for a while. She said, "Your body has just recovered. Mom has already asked. She will be back in a few days." I stood next to her and smiled to myself. Over the years, Mom and Dad didn't even know the name of my company or where I lived. They don't even know. And who to ask? My brother nodded and turned to leave the study. Mom continued to look through the information in her hands. A photo was presented in front of her eyes. In the photo was a bone that had its flesh picked off. But it wasn't hard to tell that they were human bones. Mom frowned tightly and seemed to feel the cruelty of the murderer as well. Even so, she still took the case. I couldn't help but wonder if she knew. When her client was the murderer of her own daughter, how would she feel? Abab walked into the study with milk in his hand. He glanced at the photo on the table and immediately looked away. "Vera, do you really want to take on this lawsuit? Didn't you say that the identity of the deceased has not been confirmed? How could anyone confess to the crime?" Mom took a sip of milk. The logic of a murderer who knows. This little girl is also pitiful. And I don't know how her mom and dad became parents. Missing for so long. But they didn't even realize it. Hearing this, a mist of water rose under Dad's eyes. It seemed like he was grieving for the victim. He looked at Mom. "This case has been ironed out. The murderer has surrendered himself. There is nothing you can do about it. Right?" Mom smiled confidently and said nothing more. It was as if she had everything under control. When I was a child, my mom was often on TV. And she always said that she became a lawyer to do justice. But in the face of popularity, fame and money, she seemed to have changed. She became selfish and vain. She would do anything to win a case. She can't accept negative comments from others, including her children. She can't accept it at all. That's why she hates me so much for being mediocre. 9. I leaned my head on my mom's shoulder and asked her in a calm tone, "Mom, they say that mother and child are connected. Can't you feel how much pain I was in? A month ago, I went to the hospital to visit my brother. I bumped into my mom, who had just left the hospital room. I subconsciously pulled my cuffs and took a few steps back. She glanced at me, her eyes cold to the core. What are you doing here? You still have the face to come see him. After my brother's accident, Mom and Dad forbade me to visit him. Every time I came, I picked a night to visit him. But I never thought I'd run into him." I didn't answer her, and put the flowers on the nightstand. The next second, the flowers were dropped on the floor. Mom pointed at my face and said, "Take your broken flowers and get out. I'll transfer your brother to the hospital if I bump into him again. If you don't want him to be bumpy, don't come to see him again." The tears that I had suppressed fell down. I yelled at her, "Why are you doing this to me? Why? If I could, I would have preferred that it was me who was lying there. Then I wouldn't have to be tormented every day and night." Instead of answering me, she simply chose to ignore me. I left the hospital disoriented and casually called a cab. I didn't know at that time that the cab was waiting for me on purpose. I was so deep in pain that I couldn't help myself. I hated myself for being so weak and incompetent. Knowing full well that she pushed me away again and again. It was a sign that she didn't love me. I still longed to see a trace of difference in her eyes. Even if it's disguised. Tense as I was a child. I could not have my own hobbies. Even more so. I can't have friends. She said they would only affect my studies. In order to get her approval. I did as I was told. I peeled back the layers of my original self. And then forced in a little bit of the luck that wasn't mine. I insisted that this was the only way my mom would love me. I clenched my hands. Letting my nails sink raw into my flesh. As if this was the only way to suppress my shaking body. But I didn't even notice that I had been taken to the middle of nowhere. Suddenly the driver coldly asked. "Are you the daughter of Chend a scholar?" I snapped back to my senses and nodded my head numbly. Then immediately shook my head again. The man yanked my arm and dragged me out of the car. The darkness of the night. Strange men. Wet ground. The highly overlapping scenes made my legs stop thrashing. Great fear gripped my throat, making me forget to beg for mercy. Only one step backward. The man said, "If you want to blame it on your Chen Dashu's daughter. It's your mom who is indiscriminate." What a bullshit justice-seeking lawyer, Chen. It's all a lie. The man waved a knife and cut off my flesh piece by piece. From my thighs to my arms. The tearing pain made me instinctively cry out those two words. "Mom. I'm in pain. Mom, help me." With all my strength I felt for my cell phone in my pocket. The man unexpectedly stopped moving. And under his gaze, I dialed her number. "The number you have dialed is in the middle of a call." The man spoke in a disappointed tone. "Hey. Why didn't you get through?" He snatched my cell phone and cut off my fingers one by one. But I couldn't even feel a trace of pain at this moment. Disappointment from the bones out. Paralyzed my whole body nerves. I have told myself countless times. Forget it. If you don't love it, you don't love it. But every holiday. The Spring Festival. Mid-Autumn Festival and other traditional festivals. Will make the originally lonely me more eager for affection. I always think of trying again. Even if they don't let me go home. Even if what I get in return is always mockery. Abuse and resentment. But at least their voices came over the phone. And the empty house was no longer surprisingly quiet. No longer was it just the sound of my gasps. Probably didn't want to continue wasting words with me. So they killed my last thought. The night was quiet. So quiet that you could only hear the sound of flesh tearing. 17 in a trance. I remembered my brother. When I was in school, my classmates collectively isolated me. Behind my back. Say bad things about me. Give me nicknames. Once after school, I was blocked in a corner by some senior girls. "Arya, why are you so high and mighty? Who do you think you're showing your face to? You're just relying on your parents." But so what? I heard your parents don't even like you. My parents almost never came to my parent-teacher conferences. And the rare times they did come, they were always black-faced and disgusted that I was a disgrace to them. The difference in treatment between mom and dad is obvious to all. A child with no one to back him up is doomed to isolation. "Get out of the way." The teenager's crisp voice rang out. The younger brother stood in the sunlight. His eyes full of anger. "Next time I see you guys bullying my sister, I'll have you all looking at me." My younger brother is good looking. Obviously only 13 years old. He is already a head taller than me. After a few girls were chased away, he still didn't forget to show off in front of me. He shook his bangs in front of his forehead. Was I handsome just now? I was amused by this action, and my gloomy mood was cleared away. Since then, my brother became my bodyguard. Wherever I go, he follows me. He said that no matter what happens in the future, he will be on my side. Protect me. It's him who let me slowly find myself. I'm not greedy. I thought that even if mom and dad don't love me, it's still good to have a brother. But fate was so unfair. He took away the only person who loved me. My soul detached from my body the next second after my breath stopped. I watched as the man put a little bit of the picked-off meat into a black plastic bag. Then an axe was pulled out of the trunk again and hacked at my limbs. I thought death was the source to end all pain. Unfortunately, I was wrong. I was pulled back to my next of kin by an unknown force. I saw my mother awaken from a nightmare, and she dreamed of me for the first time. You see, how could it not be felt? It's like the words she used to say. I'm your mom, and this life of yours, including your body and bones, is mine. I was conceived in her womb, even if the umbilical cord was cut. But that bond of blood has never been broken. So much so that after I died, my soul was still pulled back to her. Soon the day of my birthday came, and my brother grew more and more agitated. An inexplicable uneasiness spread in his heart. He took advantage of Mom and Dad's absence to find my company with his memories from 5 years ago. He asked the manager of the company where I had gone on a business trip and approximately how long I would be back. The manager looked confused. What business trip? Arya hasn't been in the office for a month. The ugly lie was exposed and my brother froze in place. He stumbled all the way to my rental house. His mouth kept muttering. But Mom and Dad said my sister was away on a business trip. There must be a mistake somewhere. He didn't believe that his beloved parents would lie. He doesn't believe that there are parents who don't love their children. He always said that they were all family and Mom and Dad were just angry. He firmly believed that there was no such thing as a family feud. The more naive my brother is, the more I'm a deeper-minded person. The first time he talked back to Mom for me was the day I moved out of the house. He looked at his mom with eyes full of disappointment. I always thought that I was the cause of the difference in the way you treated my sister, so I tried my best to make it up to her. Now I know. Even without me, you would still be like this. And all you did was just to satisfy your own vanity. Facing the accusation, the always strong mom cried. She leaned into Dad's arms, so aggrieved that she couldn't help herself. Dad chided his brother for not understanding his parents' pain. Everything your mom and I do is for your sister's good. What kind of parent doesn't love their own child? It's fine that your sister doesn't understand your mom's bitterness. But you have to learn from her. What kind of ecstasy did she give you to make you protect her so much? They stood on the moral high ground, counting all my faults. I left the house to the wavering gaze of my brother. I know he hesitated, questioned, but he was not wrong. Since he was born, he had grown up with parents full of love and affection, so he couldn't relate to my despair and helplessness. My brother clenched his fists and pounded on the door, desperate to plead for something. The knocking drew the landlady next door. She looked at the teenager in front of the door who looked similar to me and spoke slowly. May I ask who you are, Arya? My brother turned his head to look at the visitor. I'm Maria's brother. Grandma, do you know my sister? The landlord's grandmother replied to him. Yes. Your sister rents my house. She hasn't been back for a month. Has she gone home? If she's gone home, you should keep Arya company. She's lived with me for 5 years. She's always been alone, and doesn't have many friends. It's not good for a young girl. It's easy to suffocate her. After the landlord left, my brother squatted in front of my door for a long time. He seemed to be thinking that I had neither gone home nor to the office. Then where should I have gone? And where could I have gone? His face gradually faded from blood and became pale. He dared not go on thinking. 13 His brother gathered his emotions and just arrived home when his mom came up and took his hand with a worried look on her face. Where have you been? I didn't answer the phone when I called you. Do you want to hurry me to death? The younger brother raised his eyes to meet his mom's line of sight. And he spoke coldly. Do you know what day today is? Under his mom's puzzled gaze, his brother burst out laughing. He shook off his mom's hand with force and snarled. Sister is obviously not traveling. So why did you lie? He pressed a little closer to his mom. Do you know that she hasn't been to the office for a month? She's been missing for over a month. Did you know that? How can you be so indifferent to her? Aren't you worried that something might happen to her? facing the chain of questions from her brother. Mom's expression was calm from beginning to end. She spoke flatly. What could happen to her? Leo. Don't forget. She's the one who put you in this situation. The younger brother stepped back a little. He looked at his mom incredulously. So you've been blaming her for these 5 years? While talking, Dad came back. He sensed the strange atmosphere. He stepped forward to support his brother's trembling body. What's going on here? Leo, you're just fine. You can't get emotional. His brother's lips quivered, and he grabbed his dad's arms. You've hated your sister for the past 5 years just as much as Mom did, right? How could he not hate me? Everything Mom did. He recognized. He even hid the scandal of my assault to save face. He said, Arya, I'm doing this for your own good. You'll have to marry someone later. I'm a man. No man would want a woman who's been raped. Ridiculous? The person who said those words turned out to be my own father. For the first time, my brother felt the cold-bloodedness of his parents. Facing his dad scowling, he suddenly understood something. He dropped to the ground. Since you guys hate her, who are you to hate her? Have you guys forgotten that she is also a victim? Just then, Mom's cell phone rang. I went to it. It was an unfamiliar number. Is this Mr. Chen? The victim's identity has been confirmed. Yesterday, a grandpa found a bag of rotting human flesh in the garbage station. And it was matched by DNA. The person on the other end of the line paused for a few seconds. It was confirmed that the victim is Arya. And since you are related, you need to recuse yourself from this lawsuit. I'd also like to ask you and your family to come to the police station. 14 I wondered countless times how my mom would react when she learned the truth. Would she regret what she had done? Would she cry and weep for me in grief? Like a dog. I tried desperately to see a hint of remorse in her eyes. But she was always flat. After hanging up the phone, she acted as if nothing had happened. She called out to Mrs. Shane to start dinner. She curtly went to pull her brother to eat. Her brother laughed and shrugged off her hand. You simply don't deserve to be a mother. Countless times I've wondered if you and Dad wouldn't love me if I was just like my sister. But now I have the answer. Mom probably didn't stand still and fell straight to the floor. Her eyes filled with tears and she looked at her brother lost in thought. So what do you want me to do? She's already dead. Do you want me to pay for her life? Dad and brother were simultaneously shocked by her words. At the same time, Vera. Who just called? Mom got up from the ground as she calmly straightened her clothes. Her voice was so calm that not a ripple could be heard. The police station. The victim is Arya. Dad's face was filled with pain. His mouth trembling as he couldn't utter a complete sentence. Are you saying that the one who was split up was it Arya? Mom gave a soft and calmly went to the table to eat. Her usual indifference spoke to me once again. Dad stepped forward and snatched her chopsticks. Vera. How can you even eat? The one who died is our daughter. Mom looked at him infuriately and stood up from the table. Dad pulled her arm and yelled low. How could you be so cold-blooded? Mom turned her head to look at him. Who are you to accuse me? He opened his mouth as if he had been strangled. Unable to say a word. 15 Long time no see. Counselor Chen. Now do you remember who I am? The man in the interrogation room stared at his mother and smiled. How does it feel to know that the victim is your own daughter? I didn't realize until now why the man hated Mom so much. It turns out that 10 years ago, Mom helped a man who raped his daughter win his case. His daughter couldn't accept the result and ended up slitting her wrists. So he hated his mom. And he wanted to take revenge on me for all the pain he had suffered. He wanted Mom to feel the pain of losing her own daughter. I covered my chest and took a few steps back. But it was good. In the old days, Nazhar returned the favor to his mother by cutting off his flesh. And now Arya is suffering on her mother's behalf. We don't tell each other anything. Do you know how stubborn your daughter is? Even to her death. She won't admit that you're not a good lawyer. It's a shame that you're as young as a flower. But you have to bear the guilt for your own mother. The man thought those words would irritate his mom. But he was wrong. From the beginning to the end, Mom's face did not ripple. She just quietly listened to the man, recounting the whole process of killing me. This made the man almost break his defenses, and his handcuffed hands frantically pounded on the tabletop. Aren't you sad? Why aren't you sad? Are you not a mother? I don't know why. But at this moment I feel a little bit sorry for this murderer. He probably doesn't realize that not everyone is like him. They love their children so much. 16 The entrance to the police station was surrounded by a bunch of media. Mr. Chen, did you know that the victim was your daughter? Lawyer Chen heard that you had previously provided the police with proof that the murderer was mentally ill. May I ask what you are feeling now? Can you tell us? According to a source, your couple has always resented Arya. May I ask if that's true? Mr. Howard, do you think you're a competent father? Dad's face was a shade of green and purple. He opened his mouth but didn't know where to start. I stood by and smiled bitterly. How could he be a good father? There was a time when I did ask him for help. Dad, I seem to be sick. When I close my eyes, I remember that night. I'm scared. I want to move back home. But he said, don't come back. If it wasn't because you were capricious and had to move out, your brother wouldn't be like this. If you like living outside, then die outside. Dad disclosed to the media that his brother became a vegetable to save a strange girl. The brother is labeled as a hero, saying he deserves to be the son of Mr. Howard and Lawyer Chan. Mom and Dad consumed my brother's merits and their careers flourished, without knowing that I was in a rented house of less than 20 square meters. Day in and day out, I'm struggling to survive. When I had an emotional breakdown, I could only use self-mutilation to suppress the pain. I'm like a madman. Cut off my long hair and shaved my head. Years of taking antidepressants, coupled with my overeating, I turned myself into a 150-pound greasy fat man. Looking at the girl in the mirror with an inch of hair and a tiger's back, I can't believe I thought this was okay. So I wouldn't be targeted by the bad guys. So ragged and tattered. I once wanted to live a good life. I longed to stand in the sun like a normal girl. To have my own friends. Someone to talk to tell me that none of this was my fault. But no one was ever willing to reach out and give me a hand. More often than not, it's just the blank stares of passers-by, the mockery of co-workers, and the vitriol of my parents, and my parents' bad language. 17 Mom and Dad returned home, thinking they were free from the media. But I don't know which reporter uploaded the video to the internet. It caused a massive crusade by netizens with a strong sense of justice. Netizens picked out the home address, and some people even sent wreaths to Mom and Dad. Dad's school also suffered a lot because of this incident. Netizens asked the school to give an explanation, believing that people like Dad were not worthy of being teachers. Mom's law firm was surrounded by people every day. The reputation she had worked so hard for so many years was ruined. On the day of the funeral, the sun was shining. In addition to my younger brother who couldn't accept the truth, relatives who usually don't treat me well came, as well as some strangers. At this moment in time, they all wore sad expressions on their faces. I was put into a small altar. My father, who had always been gentle and elegant, could not hold back his tears. He said he regretted that he had failed to fulfill his responsibility. If he could, he would die in my place. Mom shed tears after all. She shivered her lips. I'm sorry. Arya. Arya. How could Mom not love you? Arya. So she remembered my nickname. It's just that I haven't heard it in a long time. Since when did she stop calling me that? Maybe it started when I did a test more than 3 times and still made a lot of mistakes. Or maybe it was when I won 3rd place in the city's essay contest and couldn't wait to share it with her. But she said, your brother won 1st place in the national math competition and didn't even brag about it. So what are you fooling around for? Mom fell to her knees in front of the tombstone and wept bitterly, beating her chest. Dad also knelt down next to her. He kowtowed vigorously to my tombstone. I'm sorry. Mom and Dad. I deserve to die. Mom and Dad were too busy, only thinking of giving you and your brother a better life, but neglected to care for you. Thump, thump, thump. Every time he kowtowed hard, a layer of skin would break on his forehead, until patches of blood appeared on his forehead. You see how hypocritical. I stood in front of the tombstone, coldly watching them sympathize. I don't believe they really regret it. At best it's to alleviate their own guilt. Unfortunately, I'm just a soul. They couldn't hear me. They couldn't see me. As expected, Dad suddenly raised his head. The sadness in his eyes had been replaced with indifference. He turned to the group of strangers and said, "Did you record it?" The strangers waved their cell phones and nodded. "It's recorded. Don't worry." The wind in the cemetery was so strong that it blew a shiver through my light body. I curled up and smiled bashfully. That's the right thing to do. If you don't cherish it when you're alive, how can you suddenly regret it when you're dead? Mom and Dad's years of accumulated contacts played a role at this time, plus the video taken at the cemetery. Soon the online scolding turned into sympathy. Arya's mom and dad are also first-time parents. Maybe there's some kind of misunderstanding. I heard that Arya was introverted and probably didn't communicate with her parents. I don't believe there are parents who don't love their children. Dad sat in his study, looking at the comments on his cell phone. A satisfied smile appeared. For the first time, I realized that turning into a soul was such a cruel thing to do. I wanted to push over the lamp. I wanted to knock over the water glass. I wanted to scare him. I wanted to tell him that I was around him at all times. I know his every move. Unfortunately, I couldn't. Fortunately, my soul is getting weaker by the day. I think I should be dissipating soon. Finally, I don't have to be trapped in this home where I don't belong. A teen time passes quickly, and the living still have to live. My death didn't affect Mom and Dad much. They still went to and from work as usual. Mom went to work normally that day. Shortly after she arrived at the law firm, she received a call from the school leader. It said that Dad was blocked by a group of people in front of the school. During the tug of war, Dad didn't know which one of them had smashed his head and fainted on the spot. Mom couldn't believe it. Do you know who they were? He's always been kind to people and he doesn't have any enemies. Yes. Dad was always kind to people and had a good reputation in the industry. But he only treats his daughter harshly. The school leader paused. I heard it was a group of netizens who saw some videos on the internet. For the first time, a panicked expression appeared on Mom's calm face. She hung up the phone and immediately went online to search. The video of her brother's real name report rushed onto the hot search. In the video, he sent out bottles of my antidepressant medication, as well as the last certificate of severance I left behind, and a bank book. He gave an account of my assault, my parents' concealment of the facts, and my 5 years of mental destruction. Mom sped all the way to the hospital. My brother was sitting in front of my dad's hospital bed. His eyes were empty, and not a trace of expression could be seen on his face. Mom was perhaps angry. She slapped her brother hard. Handsome's face immediately turned red. You actually went to Arya's rental house that day, didn't you? That's how you know she's your sister. We're still the parents who gave birth to you and raised you. You white-eyed wolf, said Mom, cried as she pounded her brother's chest. Raising you for nothing. What your father and I did. Wasn't it also a fight for you? You didn't even graduate from college for her. You were so smart. And she ruined it all. My brother grinned. Wasn't it you and Dad who taught me that? How can we have peace of mind when my sister died so tragically? My brother was about to say something else but was interrupted by the doctor who entered the hospital room. The doctor's face was full of regret as he said that Dad had been checked for brain cancer. Mom's face instantly turned pale when she heard the news. She looked at her brother. Are you satisfied now? The brother sniffled, his voice muffled for a few moments. Haven't you ever thought of it as retribution? My brother pulled my red journal out of his duffel bag and tossed it to Mom. She tried to live countless times, begging you guys to pull her through. But you and Dad ignored it. Do you really think that brute killed your sister? His brother choked for a split second. And he tilted his head, too stubborn to let the tears fall. You're all so horrible. Not only do you not feel guilty, but you say you did it all for the sake of your sister. Instead, you say you did everything for me. But don't worry. With my sister's experience, I won't blame myself. And I won't let you PUA. She will live on with my sister's share. After saying that, he turned around and walked out of the hospital room. Mom broke down. She shouted, "Leo, where are you going? Come back." She stumbled after him. "Mom needs you." Leo. Tears covered her cheeks. The once capable and decent lawyer Chen. Now he's just like I was once. She prayed for her brother to look back. She seemed to feel that if her brother left, he would never come back. "Leo. Mom begs you." She fell heavily to the ground and murmured, "But your father and I really do love you." The figure of her brother slowly disappeared at the end of the corridor. Mom stumbled from the hospital room and chased him to the hospital entrance. She watched her brother get into a cab. And she was terrified. She pulled out her cell phone and called her brother as she drove after him. The phone hung up over and over again and she dialed over and over again. "Please pick up the phone. Leo. Mommy was wrong. Leo. Pick up the phone." Tears dripped onto the phone as she spoke. I sat on the passenger side. Except for the fact that I thought she was pathetic. My heart didn't flutter much. I looked at the gradually transparent body, reached out to cover her eyes, and went to her ear. "I'll never forgive you and Dad." Mom's body shook violently. She'd heard. It was so good to finally tell her softly. The street was swarming with traffic and all that could be heard was a thud. Around the corner, her car collided with a large oncoming truck. The surroundings were thrown into chaos. Cries and screams echoed. Someone was saying call the police. Someone else was saying call an ambulance. Mom leaned back in her seat covered in blood. Scarlet blood ran down her forehead to her cheeks. I stood calmly next to her, watching her life slip away. It is said that when a person is at the end of his life, he can see what he normally cannot see. Mom opened her eyes with difficulty. Her eyes went from shock to sorrow. There were other emotions that I couldn't read. She spoke with difficulty. "Arya. Arya." And I floated over to her and came face to face with her. "Don't call me that. I'm not your child now. I gave it all back to you that night. And with it, the name. I'm giving it back to you too. With my last breath." I turned and stepped into the chaos. I heard my mom's voice. She was almost pleading. "My child. Forgive Mom. I'm sorry. Mom and Dad are sorry." I didn't respond to her. Nor did I accept her apology. The Shriner asked me, "Is it worth it to tell her rather than disappear into heaven and earth?" I smiled. It didn't matter if it was worth it or not. I was born in chaos. And I will die in chaos. At least now I am no longer anyone's child. I am no longer anyone's child. I am no longer anyone's daughter. I only belong to me. Extra, the unwanted child. Vera Ly's haggard lie in her hospital bed. Mr. Howard placed a peeled grapefruit on the nightstand. The doctor said to bottom out with 3 months of breast milk. Mr. Howard sighed helplessly. "I know it's not fair to you to let you get pregnant and have a baby when your career is on the rise. Why wouldn't I want you to abort?" He pursed his lips. "You heard what the doctor said. If you abort this baby, you'll never get pregnant again." Mr. Howard was about to say something else. A nurse came in with the baby and interrupted him. "Ms. Chan, look at how cute the baby is. With its little eyes and nose. It is just like you. It will be a little beauty when it grows up." Under the persuasion of Mr. Howard and the nurse, Vera finally agreed to breastfeed her daughter for 3 months. She looked at the wrinkled little person in her arms and whispered to Mr. Howard, "I don't know if she will grow up to be like you or like me." Mr. Howard hooked his lips and smiled. "Our genes are so strong. We will only be better than the blue. Don't worry." "I hope so." By the way, let's name our daughter. Vera glanced at the grapefruit next to her. Let's call her Arya. Mr. Howard wanted to say. Wouldn't it be too hasty? But looked at Vera's impatient face. He held his tongue. Okay. Let's call it Arya. 21 Arya. Before my soul was completely dissipated, I begged the oracle for help. I entered my brother's dream, and I saw him. He had red eyes. Sis. You finally came to see me. I wanted to reach out and touch his head as I did when I was a child. Instead, I realized that my brother was already a head taller than me. Leo. You're an adult now. My brother wiped a tear. Sister. Do you blame me? Otherwise, why didn't you come to my dream for so long? I shook my head. I'm trying to make connections. Don't you want to be my brother again? Surprise appeared in my brother's eyes. Then can you let me be your brother? I smiled. Of course you can. Provided that you live this life well. My brother nodded firmly. He believed what I said and regained his vigor. The magus said that I had violated a taboo. And I'm afraid it's a bit difficult for me to become a new person. But for the sake of my tragic death in my previous life, I will be allowed to accompany my brother in a different way. It's not like I'm going back on my word. Time flies. 3 years have passed in the blink of an eye. The woman stroked my head. Yuzo, will you like me as much as you like your master? I rubbed against the woman. Meow, ah. Of course I will. So my brother won't be alone.